Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, first item on the agenda is public comment. Oh, yeah, sorry. I appreciate everyone for coming to our meeting this morning. We have an opportunity to hear from everyone who wants to speak. Now's the opportunity for public comment. If you came to speak on something, you can comment on something on the consent agenda or any other topic that's not on today's agenda. For those who would like to speak about any of the action items, we'll give you the opportunity when that item is discussed. Please fill out a green card. Right? Okay, first up, Tom Rask. And you're speaking for, it says you want to speak on public comment. Right?
Yes, I'm supposed to be Sharon Calvert first, but I have 6 minutes if you flip the card over, time from some. Sorry? No, I have this lady's time behind you. So my name is Tom Rask. I live in unincorporated Pinellas County. And I'm looking for the email I sent you guys last night, which a copy was placed at your place setting or your desk because for some reason it didn't get through. The topics it covered was that, in case you don't know it now, the BRT, the Central Avenue BRT, will not be funded in the federal 2020 budget. It will not be funded. And I hope you had this information before, but I bring it up because it was not mentioned at last month's PSTA meeting. There was a presentation, an update given on the BRT, and that was not mentioned. I want to go back to 5-6 years ago when Green Light Pinellas was on the ballot. PSTA spent tens of thousands of dollars printing up 20-page glossy brochures that look like this. This is the cover. And on page 17 of that brochure, it explained it said preparing for two futures, November 4, 2014. One future was if we do nothing, meaning if the referendum gets rejected, and the other one was if we choose to improve. I mean, that's subjective, that Green Light Pinellas would be an improvement. But anyway, the voters spoke, and 62% said no. Now, what was supposed to happen? According to PSTA's own glossy brochure, they highlighted here, bold. I didn't highlight it. PSTA did. It said, if the referendum does not pass, PSTA will default to depleted network of basic routes. And the first bullet point is 18 to 28% service cut in 2017. We're now in 2019. We haven't had that service cut. PSTA is headed towards insolvency. And no, the voters spoke. This is what we were promised. These are the two options we were given. And we selected this one. We don't have our service cuts yet. The service cuts were, of course, in the bus plan that was required for the alternatives analysis for Green Light Pinellas. I see that PSTA has been updating its information online. They have a new Central Avenue BRT fact sheet that is, the revision date is 6/11, and now apparently 2 miles have been lost because it says length of route 20 miles round trip. Well, it's an 11-mile route. 11 times 2 is 22. So, and they removed the very big buses that they showed before. Mr. Miller just sat down, testified yesterday before a subcommittee in Washington. I looked at the meeting video. When the meeting video turned towards the committee, this is what it showed, an empty room. So we, the taxpayers, are paying for Mr. Miller and Ms. Long to fly up to Washington to testify to an empty room. Returning to my email, I pointed out that even if this project gets what's called a construction agreement, And that's the first step. That's what it didn't get this year from the FTA. It then has to be funded. Just because you get a construction agreement doesn't mean it gets funded. This project is not going to get any money from the FTA anytime soon, if ever. But we, the people, will keep up the pressure. As you may know, there have been overflow crowds in St. Pete Beach at their city commission meetings opposing this project. Yesterday, in South Pasadena, they had a meeting, and they were informed by citizens that PSTA has already started the lane elimination process. No one told South Pasadena. So you guys can keep going, this board can keep going, but I suggest you take a long, hard look at this PSTA, at this BRT project, and ask yourself whether it isn't time to pull the plug. Because what I said also in my email is that some of these projects keep getting pushed, even though the FTA is indicating strongly that it's not going to get funded. I'm not privy to those discussions, but the reality is this project has now been in the project development phase for over 3 years. That's a very long time. It's going to be there at least one more year, probably two. Maybe it'll never get funded. There's going to be more bad information. There's going to be more bad news for PSTA. PSTA has also failed to meet key requirements, key financial requirements that the FTA imposes in their June 2016 final interim policy guidance governing small starts projects. So in my email yesterday, I just gave you, as I ended by saying there, a glimpse of the situation with the BRT. And if you keep going, the day when you're going to vote on the BRT, you're going to have overflow crowds here from St. Pete Beach, from South Pasadena, and also St. Pete opposing this. That's how opposed people are here. Go around, ask your constituents along the route, see if you can find even a third that are in favor of it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rask. And next, we have Sharon Calvert. Good morning.
I'm Sharon Calvert, and I live in Tierra Verde. I came to the April 25th, 2018 PSTA meeting last year, and I made a public comment about some issues with your Central Avenue BRT project and PSTA's grant requests submitted to the FTA in August of 2017. In that grant request, the route was from downtown St. Petersburg to the Don Cesar in St. Pete Beach, and that St. Pete Beach was going to fund $1.5 million to support the project. But the route alignment that the board voted on at that January 25th, 2017 meeting was from downtown St. Pete to 75th Avenue with only an option going down Gulf Boulevard to the Don Cesar if, dependent on, the support and funding of St. Pete Beach, which they've never done. The project submitted to the FTA appears to be invalid. And unfortunately, the result of ignoring some of these issues a year later is that 2 of the 3 municipalities, St. Pete Beach and South Pasadena, oppose it. There's growing opposition along in all municipalities, including St. Petersburg. There's concern and opposition about putting large buses, especially on narrow congested Gulf Boulevard, the use of those 60-foot buses or even a 40-foot bus on Gulf Boulevard. There's growing opposition to the road diet to remove a general lane of vehicle traffic for a bus-only lane. And the reason for that is because the public apparently wasn't properly informed throughout this process. There was no public hearing on the lane elimination. And unfortunately now we've come to a situation where there's even, I'm sure you know, a threatening letter that was sent by the mayor of St. Petersburg to the mayor of St. Pete Beach. The cost of the CABRT has ballooned to $44 million. And you say that's going to add 1,500 riders. That's a cost of $30,000 per rider, which is quite outrageous. Your financial position continues to decline towards insolvency as you are using your reserves to keep operating. PSTA is going insolvent without the CABRT, and the additional operating expenses is going to cause more financial hardship. It now appears that the only reason for this project is somehow to get this federal grant money, but this is a risk to all taxpayers. It's a big mess, as evidenced by these headlines that are coming out in the media. It's time for PSTA to withdraw its FTA grant request because the project you submitted is invalid and there's just too many issues. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Carlson? Good morning.
I'm Dr. Ed Carlson, president of the Large Jungle Terrace Civic Association in St. Petersburg, and president of CANU, Citizens and Neighborhoods United, which is an umbrella group for strong neighborhoods in St. Petersburg. I'm here to speak to you about the political consequences of BRT, which is a small part of what you do, but a huge impact on your image at this point, and also congestion and the mathematics of lane loss. You've got 30,000 cars going down Pasadena Avenue on 6 lanes, that's 5,000 per lane. You eliminate 2 lanes, you put 10,000 cars in the other 2 lanes. You get your buses on Gulf Boulevard, 144 BRT buses a day. You're in their gridlock. They don't have congestion, they have gridlock. You lose control of the timing of your buses and you're never going to be able to stay on schedule. First Avenue North and South, First Avenue North dead ends into Pasadena. The bus would have to cross Pasadena Avenue and turn left. Now there's not a stoplight there for the 40,000 cars coming down 66th Street. You would have to install a traffic light which would back up congestion onto 66th Street. So if you turn around at 75th Avenue in South Pasadena, you stay off of Gulf Boulevard. It makes St. Pete Beach happy. You don't need to eliminate 2 lanes on Pasadena Avenue because you can meet the requirement of 50% dedicated lanes on First Avenue North and South. So then you make South Pasadena happy. And in St. Pete, the requirement is 50% semi-dedicated lanes at peak hours. So you can do buses only from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. and from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. and let cars use at other times and make a lot of people in St. Pete happy. You've got a lot of negative press on this, and part of it is the blowback from St. Petersburg is planning to eliminate 72 miles. And so you're a small portion of that, but this is spilling over onto you and causing negative press. So for the political consequences, you need to look at making peace rather than division among the cities, and how can you work with the cities and come up with something that works for everybody. So consider the political consequences, and that's the board's responsibility. The engineering part has been laid out, and I will give you all copies of this.
Thank you. Dan Harvey? Is he there? I don't see him. Oh, there you are. Good morning.
Dan Harvey, St. Petersburg, and I also have a house on Corey Avenue about a block and a half away from where 75th Avenue is, where people want the BRT to stop. But Mayor Kreisman said, oh, no, we can't stop it there. But let me go back and talk about a regional program, which I've been trying to get across. I don't know if Whit Blanton's here, but Whit knows the regional program. And when I spoke in front of city commissioners in St. Pete Beach, I said, let's get the regional plan down. So the regional plan really involves not the lunatics we were talking about over there at Malfunction Junction that want to dig I-275 under the ground or turn it into a boulevard so we can't even get out of the area. And how many of the MPOs voted for that? It's ridiculous. I think we need the Lexus lanes. I think we need to make a plan to get to St. Pete Beach. If we get to St. Pete Beach through a regional plan, then maybe we can figure it out. We don't need BRT anytime soon. We don't need it until we know how we're going to get there over Howard Franklin, which we have the money. And I've spoke to a few people about the CSX line. This is what the conversation's about. The CSX line is available for purchase from 5th Avenue North down to Tropicana Field. Oh my gosh, maybe the Rays could even understand the mass transit aspect if a light rail or those little, the things that are coming out of TIA could just wheel right in there. The CSX line came into play when we put the RFP out for the police building. And sure enough, I had one of the proposals in. And so the group I was working with has the contract to buy the CSX line for $8 million from Fifth Avenue down to the Trop, okay? Well, it's $15 million if it's used for a trail or rail. Get the CSX line, Brad. Pay attention. Now, listen, get the CSX line. I've told it to some people. I told it to Chris. He didn't even know about it. He was out of town. We talked to our transportation committee. What do you mean? Let's look into that. But enough people know that the CSX line's for sale. Kreisman can't get it because he thinks he can sue them. He thinks our attorneys are better than CSX attorneys. Wrong. We don't even know who owns the CSX line on First Avenue South. But if you can see the vision to get a transit to First Avenue North or First Avenue South, jump on a BRT, then you can get a bus out there. And I suggest we 86 BRT until we have a regional plan. And that needs regional leadership, and it sure isn't with 3 MPOs that can't get on the same page. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Dr. Lee Davison?
I'm Dr. Lee Davison. I'm Professor Emeritus at the University of Maryland in engineering. My specialty is in statistical analysis of systems. And I would like to, in that sense, I would like to speak against anything that restricts the parking to where it's worse than it is now. I'm a director of St. Pete Opera, which is located at 2145 First Avenue South. The impact on parking there would be tremendous. We already don't have enough parking. Now, I saw where a study was done on how light parking was along there by taking an average in some month or other. That isn't what counts. Any statistician can tell you an average is just a number, and it doesn't count for fluctuations. We have many events, including rehearsals, where there aren't enough parking places now, and they have to go scrounge around for a place to park. So anything that makes it worse will affect the ability to function there and indirectly the value of the property. If we had to sell it to go somewhere else where we could park, that's not so easy to do. It's our wholly owned building. We bought it through donations and we're proud of it. A side issue, which, since I still have a little bit over a minute, is it's been said that a definite advantage of doing this would be having fewer car lanes, which would reduce accidents. Now, this has to be the element of stupidity. How could that be? If you want to reduce the number of accidents by reducing the speed on the roads, you can add more. You can reduce the speed limit, you can have more stop lines, you can have the current law enforced. So, I guess in summary, I really would like you to do whatever has to be done so we can still have as much parking as we have now. I know this is only a narrow aspect of what you're talking about, but to us it's crucial. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Leon Smiley? Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Leon Smiley, SCIU chairperson for PSTA, and I just want to read a little letter in that we wrote from Mr. Bradford and Miller. We want to thank PSTA, mainly Brad Miller and James Bradford, for working with the union to get bus enclosures. We know some of you sitting up there may think that the stabbing in Tampa was such a random act that PSTA may have moved too fast purchasing these enclosures. But the simple fact is, every day a driver is assaulted in one way or another, and it is the driver who keeps it from escalating into a more dangerous situation. Times have changed so much that we now need these enclosures. We are happy that PSTA took necessary steps to protect their drivers. So again, we say thank you, and thank you, and thank you.
Thank you very much. Barbara Hazelton, good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I come here today to talk about also the opposition to the BRT. We have an organization, loosely termed organization, called Save Our Streets, and it has been quite popular with people along the route to put signs up on their properties. And 2 out of the 3 cities now along the BRT have signed formal resolutions opposing the project, as I'm sure you're aware, but perhaps some of the people in the audience who I want to help to educate somewhat aren't aware of that. So of the 3 cities, St. Petersburg, St. Pete Beach, and South Pasadena, both St. Pete Beach and South Pasadena have, their city commissions have now entered into resolutions formal. And I'm going to talk here, first of all, about the St. Pete Beach resolution. And it says that the city of St. Pete Beach opposes the grant application to the FTA for the proposed BRT proposed by Pinellas Suncoast Transit Authority. Whereas PSTA did not consult the city prior to submitting its application to the FTA, has misrepresented the city's support for the BRT, which is still reflected in the PSTA application, and has not supplied reliable data to support a successful BRT in the city. And it goes on with some other whereases, but to get to, ones that might be of interest to the audience. The city supports mass transit in general to and on Gulf Boulevard, but negotiations with PSTA are ongoing, and PSTA is still planning the BRT and related facilities on Gulf Boulevard south of 75th Avenue, despite the city's objection. Therefore, the City Commission is hereby opposed to the proposed BRT and related facilities as currently designed by the PSTA south of 75th Avenue, and requests that the FTA take no further action on PSTA's application. Now, this was on June 13th. South Pasadena did a resolution, the city, whereas the proposed project includes changes to lane design and usage through the implementation of business access lanes, as well as relocation and reconfiguration. Residents of the city have voiced overwhelming opposition to the BRT project because of its potential to increase congestion with little expected benefit to the local community. Whereas the City Commission expressed concerns regarding the BRT project to PSTA, Ford, Pinellas MPO, and the Florida Department of Transportation with little response. And whereas the City Commission reported that the city and its residents be afforded meaningful opportunity to comment on and influence the BRT to no avail. So therefore, be it resolved that the City of South Pasadena is hereby opposed to the implementation of the BRT project on Pasadena Avenue. I see I have a couple seconds. And also, which I can talk about this in a while, but the Paso Grove Townhome Association, Harborside Homeowners Association, condos 818 units, Marina Bay Condo Association are but a few of the opposition of citizens in cities coming out against the project. Thank you.
Thank you. Fran Travison?
Hello, everyone. I am now, I used to live on 46th on Boca Ciega Isle, and my daughter still lives there, and my other child lives at off of Central Avenue. And I live on Isla del Sol, and I am 67 years old. And I took the bus because I went to the St. Pete Beach meeting, and I knew they were against the buses, so I said, I'm going to try it. So I took the bus twice. I parked at Paso Grill, took the whole loop. It took like 2.5 hours for for the whole thing. I went down to where I would visit my daughter, and I am going to tell you, I would not use that transportation because I don't have to. It is good if you have to. And I'm a talker. So I talk to a lot of people on the bus. I talk to the bus drivers. We do not need it at St. Pete Beach. It was never crowded. Even in the morning that I missed it, the bus driver said it's not crowded. They have to stand up sometimes to get to work, but we don't need it. We don't need it down Pasadena. We don't need it down Central. It is a great loop. If I did not have a car, I would use it. But if I had a car, I asked my girlfriends, none would go, and I would not do it. But I also want to say that the hotels give these people free rides. They give them tickets for free rides. There are people that work there. They don't want to take it just because they want their car. Like every American, we still want big trucks. So they don't take it. And then I asked some businesses, because I know a couple of people that own some businesses on St. Pete Beach, and they said they give free tickets for their people to ride the buses, and they don't ride that loop. There is a place for them to park. I am just saying, as a regular Joe, we don't need any more buses going down St. Pete Beach. We don't need it down Central, and we don't need it down Pasadena. Thank you very much. But I did like, if I knew, I would be able to take the bus if I had to. And the people said that ride it were very appreciative that there is such transportation to get to the beach or anywhere they want. They said that was one of the safest bus routes, the loop to St. Pete Beach and Central Avenue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tara Holman.
Hi, I am a resident of Central Oaks Park area. My husband and I have resided there for almost 20 years. Love our home, have no desire to move. We live on First Ave South. My biggest issue is you put this bus lane, I've lost my street parking, and I have no clue where to put my cars. The other issue is, I know you're planning on taking a lane out. The problem is our cars have been hit a few times by speeders, usually around 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. So now you're talking about increasing the traffic during rush hour because fewer people they have fewer lanes to travel to and from downtown. So now they're gonna, unfortunately, the speed limit on my street's 45, and I never see anybody go 45, and they're not policing it. They're not, there's never police officers pulling people over in front of my house, unfortunately. I'm also concerned if you keep the parking across the street. Now I'm fighting with my neighbors across the street to park, and I've got my 2 dogs and my kids that have to rush across that traffic to get to our house. So that is another consideration. We may increase pedestrian accidents. And then who's going to pick up the litter? I'm always picking litter up in my yard from the current people using the bus. Not that the bus is bad. I've used the Central Avenue trolley to and from the beach myself. However, I'm constantly cleaning up garbage in my front yard, and I expect that to increase if you add more traffic with the buses. So that's basically my areas of concern, especially in the First Ave, North Ave South. I'm not opposed to the busing. My question is, why can't it be on 5th? If it's on 5th Ave South, 5th Ave North, it's not going to take away that main flow of traffic. So something to consider.
Thank you. Arlene Johnson. Good morning.
My concern is my son is in a wheelchair and he's 17, and on May the 21st he was kidnapped from school on a bogus charge that he didn't have, but he's in a wheelchair and it cost $29,000. And they got in touch. My son has been riding Care Ride through the DART program for about 8 years, and on that day, he was taken into an ambulance. He was taken to All Children Hospital. His wheelchair stayed there. Mr. Silvers and Cindy Johnson took it upon themselves and kidnapped his wheelchair. They held it hostage. And so I want to know what is going to be done about this policy. I paid round trip that day. They don't have no proper papers. They're going to be charged with kidnapping, false imprisonment. He's in All Children Hospital, which done killed 11 kids in the Heart Institute, and he been there for over 30 days. And for what? When is this going to stop? These people did not have the authority. We're not in their jurisdiction. And what is the policy for Care Ride and DART? And they knew where my son was at before I did. And he told me, Ron Silvers told me that they had order from the sheriff department to keep his wheelchair, which is grand theft. So I need somebody to get in touch with me. I left my phone number because somebody's going to federal prison because that is Medicaid fraud. They still have my son in there. Nothing wrong with him. They don't have a charge on me. And how is it that the DART and PSTA and Care Ride can make choices on getting stolen property? That is 5 years imprisonment. And I be darned if they not gonna be going. So I need Mr. Miller to please call me. My phone number is on there because it's an ongoing case. They got the statute 787.01. That is kidnapping. And then they got false imprisonment. They has held my son hostage. He's in a wheelchair. They held him hostage at All Children Hospital, which is under federal investigation. They have already lost their funding for Medicare. And this policy needs to be, I need to know who gave them authority to get in touch with Care Ride. The sheriff department called Care Ride. And Care Ride took it upon themselves when I called and said my son was missing from school, which I didn't know. Sunstar is in trouble as well. This is going to be the biggest case since Wonder Man, the drug bust. Because everybody that knows my son's name and did this illegal act is going to federal prison.
Ms. Johnson, your time is up, and you've addressed quite a few issues here this morning, so let us have our staff look into it a little bit, and we'll call you, okay?
ASAP.
Thank you. Okay, that is the end of the cards that I have. Is there anyone else in the audience that wishes to speak to us this morning? Did you fill out a card, ma'am? Well, please turn it in to the staff so that we can. Please state your name and your address. Thank you.
My name is Susan Ward. I'm a resident of St. Pete Beach, and I want to be just very quick. The BRT system is totally opposed. It's opposed by every resident in St. Pete Beach. We are a small, narrow barrier island. We are a beach community. To have 144 buses running around, your presentation doesn't do it justice because you're comparing us to big cities. We are a beach community. If you ask me who to compare us with, compare us to Key West. They don't have any buses running around in the central part of town. There is not enough space. Now, I know you say we have to bring workers because most of the workers live outside St. Pete Beach. Well, Tradewinds has already told everybody they have 1,000 workers and only 41 has taken up their free bus passes. There just isn't a need. So I don't understand why we keep going down this road to try and ruin a community that is both residential and commercial, and even attempting to put layover station in a residential historic area. It's no wonder that people are opposed to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak this morning? Anyone? All right, thank you. All right, so as you know, we are all working on these transportation issues, not for ourselves, but for our future generations. Every summer, PSTA does the same thing by sponsoring high school interns in partnership with the Bowley Center in St. Petersburg. PSTA's Director of Human Resources, Trish Collins, will introduce the young men and women working at PSTA this year. Trish?
Good morning, Chair Long and esteemed board members. I'm happy to talk to you today about one of the many strong relationships that PSTA has with community partners in initiatives that make Pinellas County a better place to live and work. Bowley Centers is a valuable Pinellas County resource established in 1970 to serve individuals with mental disabilities, individuals who are homeless, veterans, and importantly, our youth. We've been proud to partner with Bowley Centers for many years now to support their summer youth intern program, which is in line with our key strategic area of community support. The Summer Youth Intern Program matches eligible young people in the city of St. Petersburg with local employers for paid 8 to 10 week internships. For many, this is their first work experience and a great start to their career. It's a wonderful opportunity to build up a resume, learn about career options, and develop mentoring relationships. We are very happy to welcome 3 interns working with us at PSTA this summer: Tajane Fizell, Shania Weldon, and Xavier Gwynn, who are working in our transportation, finance, and planning departments. Tajane and Shania are here with us today to introduce themselves, along with 2 of our alumni interns from past years, Byron Boykins and Vershayla Munnerlin. I'm going to invite each of them to briefly introduce themselves.
Hello, good morning. Come to the microphone so we can hear you.
Good morning, I'm Vershayla. In 2014, I was a part of the Summer Youth Intern Program, working with the Transportation Department for TD and DART. Since then, I've graduated college from Florida State University as well as USF, and I'm currently working with the city of St. Petersburg. My field of profession is speech-language pathologist, and my next goal is to go to grad school. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, I'm Shania Weldon. I am 17 years old. I am a rising senior at Northside Christian High School. I have had the opportunity to intern under Miss Jane Brown in the transportation department, and it has been amazing. I look forward to meeting you all. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Tajane Fizell. I'm an intern in the procurement department under Mr. Al Burns. Just to tell you about myself, I'm 18 years old, bilingual in French and English, an alumni in Northeast High School, and I'm starting SBC this fall. I want to know more about the company and the different roles that it serves our community, and as I'm looking forward to the responsibility that my title holds. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you.
Good morning, board. My name is Byron Boykins. I was in the Summer Youth Intern Program in 2013. I was working in the marketing department during the Green Light Pinellas movement. I'm currently working for the city of St. Petersburg, and I am a graduate of St. Petersburg College. I do want to say I do appreciate the privilege of being a summer intern through this program. It taught me a lot to deal with business and also with finance, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, all of you, for sharing a little bit about yourself and introducing yourselves. We want to thank our current and our former interns for working so hard during their internships and for coming and sharing their unique talents and skills with us. We wish them great success as they move forward with their education and their careers. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think it's safe to say to all of you interns that are here today that the reason that we work so hard to provide public transportation is for you young people and for your generation and millennials who really don't want to have to spend money on a car and insurance and gas, but be able to use public transportation. So thank you for your efforts here this summer. Thank you. Okay. Let's get a...
come forward with it for a photo? You guys can stand right here.
Sure. All right. And now can we have our newly elected track committee chair, Miss Elizabeth Olden? Good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Long, Mr. Miller, and esteemed board members. The track met on June 18, 2019. Special thanks to Mr. Schulman for attending our meeting. I am honored to report that track unanimously elected me as chair and Camille Soleil as vice chair. We look forward to continuing our service, representing PST riders, and helping the agency improve our services and increase ridership throughout Tampa Bay. Without PSTA and DART, I would not have the ability to do my daily errands, attend physical therapy, and be an active citizen in my community. Jeff Thompson, Director of Transportation, and Theo B., Superintendent of Safety, Security, and Training, gave a presentation on PSTA's essential role in Pinellas County's emergency preparedness for hurricane season. Mr. Thompson went into detail of PSTA's plan to protect the bus network and assets, communicate emergency information to the employees and customers, reroute buses to take evacuees to and from shelters, and effectively suspend services with sustained winds over 45 miles per hour. Officially not on our agenda as an action or information item during member comments, TRAC did discuss our thoughts on the bus drivers' protective barriers. We discussed the pros and cons and did not take any formal action. However, it was clear to me that as riders, we appreciate the men and women of PSTA, especially our drivers. The next TRAC meeting is July 16th at 4 p.m., and as always, board members are welcome to attend. Thank you.
And thank you so much for that very comprehensive report. Very well done.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any questions, members? No? Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and now Commissioner Eggers, are you prepared to do the Forward Pinellas report?
Sure. Try to make it a lot briefer than the 3.5-hour meeting that we had, certainly.
Yes, that would be good.
I promise. But first of all, I just wanted to thank the folks that were here this morning to make comments regarding a number of issues, especially regarding our BRT program. And like always, I hope our staff continues to address the questions that are being asked and passing along those answers to the board, because each question that asked seems to have a different nuance to it that we need to be aware of. So I appreciate the staff continuing to address those questions and then in turn letting us know the answers that they're providing. The main thing we did was we approved the Transportation Improvement Program for the 2020 to 2024 timeframe. Project highlights included the construction of the 2020 bus on shoulder I-275, right-of-way and design in 2024 for the I-275 lane continuity, construction for various complete street improvements, construction advanced to 2022 for a pedestrian overpass at US 19 at Harn Boulevard, construction in 2024 of the 71st Street Trail Connector for the Pinellas Trail to 38th Avenue, and continued other Pinellas Trail Loop construction. So that continues to be some of the things that were addressed, and including, of course, a lot of continuing work around Pinellas County. They also set some transportation project priorities. Some of them unfunded at this point, but certainly things that we'll be asking from FDOT, including operational improvements to Honeymoon Island on the congested Dunedin Causeway, investments in the US 19 corridor to support express transit, Ulmerton Trail connection to Howard Franklin Bridge, and others that were discussed. I didn't want to get into all of them. We continue to support the regional TMA leadership group set of top 5 priorities, which are the State Road 60-275, I-75 at Overpass, I-75 at Gibsonton, I-275 operational improvements, and the Central Avenue BRT. It was interesting, the director was there, and he talked a little bit about the MPO in Hillsborough County in a relatively close vote, continue to support the lane improvements at the junction in downtown, but continue to say that there's some efforts and interest in that boulevard conversion, that the Pasco County and Pinellas County is not, would like to listen, but are certainly not supportive of that as it relates to us trying to get out of this area if we ever need to, and just traveling the roads and the interstates that we've all grown accustomed to having. Let me get back to where I was. FDOT presented we probably had an hour conversation on the Indian Shores Gulf Boulevard drainage issues. Talked a little bit about the countywide plan and talking about the new land use strategy that we're forming throughout the county around activity centers and multimodal corridors. Quite a bit of discussion on that. Don't want to get into too much detail there. It was good having the secretary there. He continues to come and stay most of the meeting and trying to listen in on what's going on firsthand. The Tourist Development Council and the Board of County Commissioners did meet this month and had some robust discussion about transit and that role in the tourist industry and how important that is. So there was some continued good conversation at a workshop that we had this month. And that really is all I've got for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions, concerns? No? All right, and I will give you my T-BARTA report. We had our board meeting on Friday, June 21st. The Federal Transit Administration and the National Transit Database reporting procedures and document retention policy was approved by the board, as specifically as it relates to T-BARTA's van pool program. This policy will apply to all financial, programmatic, statistical, and other supporting records and documentation used for reporting operational and financial data to the Federal Transit Administration National Transit Database. The FY 2018 audit report was accepted by the board and was prepared by Clifton Larson Allen. A formal motion was made and passed to have Clifton Lofton Allen create a formal risk assessment policy. This will allow T-BARTA to better evaluate funding going forward. The governing board also approved an increase of the FKQ website budget from $60,000 to $62,150, and these additional funds will cover a Spanish translation option on our website, so many of our citizens are Spanish-speaking only. And the next board meeting is scheduled for July 26th at 10 a.m., right here in our PSTA boardroom. Any questions? No? All right. And now we are on the consent agenda. May I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
All those in favor, please signify by saying aye, or
Aye.
we'll open the voting system. Forgot we're on electronic.
You got me too.
Okay, there you go. Is that everybody? Yes, unanimously approved. Our first action item. What? Oh, Charlie is out of the room. What? Yeah. Our first action item this morning is really an important milestone for our entire Tampa Bay region. We're going to vote to advance the region's very first rapid transit line further than any project has been in the past. Secondly, we will thank our colleagues from the City of St. Petersburg and accept their financial support for this project. PSTA's Project Director, Abhishek Dayal, will introduce both items. Abhishek.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. Abhishek Dayal, Director of Project Management Office here, and happy to talk to you about the Central Avenue BRT project. The two items, as Madam Chair has referenced, they signify a significant momentum in the project on where we are. The two items are for action. The first item is to amend the contract with H.W. Lochner for preliminary engineering and final design services for a not-to-exceed amount of $1.85 million to extend their contract limit to $3.55 million to complete the final design for this project. And in the audience here, I do have staff from H.W. Lochner, Mr. Don Skelton and Tom Stoner, who's the project manager for the design team, and we're happy to partner with them on this project. So as you all are aware, this is a critical project connecting downtown St. Petersburg through South Pasadena to St. Pete Beach. We've had a number of conversations during the first phase of this project with various stakeholders, and where this project stands is we are looking at an alternate terminus at the County Beach Park for this project. So this will essentially make this project about 10.3 miles long, terminating at the County Beach Park. But it will still hit the same destinations, the key locations that we had originally intended to by stopping at the County Beach Park. As Madam Chair had alluded to, this is a very critical project, not just critical to Pinellas County, but also to the Tampa Bay region, as this could provide the momentum to further expand our connectivity to other key destinations in the Tampa Bay region. The board might be aware that T-BARTA is undertaking a PD&E effort for a 41-mile BRT project, so definitely the success of this project will also trigger other important projects in the region. So it is important that we continue with this, moving forward with this project. Also, as was already mentioned, this is the first Tampa Bay project in the federal process in the Capital Investment Grant Program. We have updated the project cost at $43.93 after doing some preliminary engineering work. With our funding coming from the Federal Transit Administration, Florida Department of Transportation, City of St. Petersburg, which you'll hear about more in the next item, as well as PSTA's own capital reserves. Where we stand right now is we are at 30% design, and we're rapidly working towards a 60% design submittal, which we hope to have done by July-August timeframe. We have already refined the capital costs, which is what I shared in the previous slide. And we are continuously coordinating with our various project partners, including FTA, FDOT, City of St. Pete, and more recently, Pinellas County for that County Beach Park property. As I mentioned, City of St. Pete recently approved 2 funding agreements. The one more recent agreement was approved by City Council unanimously a couple of weeks ago for $4 million towards design and construction for the BRT project. Another funding agreement that was approved a couple of months ago by the City Council was to enhance the BRT project for public art in the stations. And this was all locally funded with $750,000 of City of St. Pete's funding. In addition to those 2 funding agreements, we're also working very collaboratively with FDOT to complete their share of the local funds, to complete all the local funding commitments that we need for this project. From the federal side, as you all know, we did receive a medium high, which is the second highest rating that the project can get by FTA as recently as March of this year. And I should also add that in the financial justification rating, we got the high rating, which is the highest rating that a project can get for this. Since last month, FTA has also begun formal oversight of this project, which is a necessary step to get a grant agreement. And so to that end, FTA has assigned a project management oversight contractor to work on reviewing our design, our cost estimates, and our schedules. And so we're working with the PMOC on this project for this. And so all these great milestones, including the St. Petersburg action on the funding agreement, will put us on track for a grant agreement by the end of this year. So what you see on the screen right now is the schedule. We are still in design, and we hope to complete that design by fall of this year. And assuming we get the grant agreement by the end of this year, we can start construction and have the project up and running by the end of 2020 or early part of 2021. So let me talk about the H.W. Lochner contract for the preliminary engineering and final design services. Back in August, this board had approved this contract for a not-to-exceed amount of $1.7 million, and that was supposed to cover 3 phases of this project. The 3 phases include preliminary engineering, final design, and design services once we get into construction. The reason for those 3 phases was so that the design team can come in and really understand what the project issues are, get a deeper understanding on what kind of analysis was done during planning, and then essentially assess what needs to be changed, what needs to be further evaluated as we move further along in the final design phase. So they have completed the first phase, and they are well into the second phase, but will require some contract modifications to complete the final design phase of this project. So a couple of other reasons for contract adjustments were inclusion of the public art, which was funded by City of St. Petersburg for this effort. There were also some scope changes based on community feedback. We heard from several agencies, not only the cities, but also neighborhoods. We met with USF and St. Pete and made quite a few adjustments to the design based on the feedback. So that also changed the scope fairly significantly based on that feedback. And then our engineers also did a lot of evaluation out on the field and made recommendations to move a few stations as well to make sure those are feasible during construction. And then we also conducted a very detailed inventory of traffic signals along the corridor. As the board may know, we are looking to implement transit signal priority to increase predictability, increase speeds on our buses. And so that does require reconfiguring the traffic signals along the corridor. And so our design team spent quite a bit of time inventorying the traffic signals along the corridor and come up with designed to make sure that it has the capability of implementing signal priority. So for all those reasons, we are going to have to amend their contract for an amount of $1.85 million. So the request or the recommendation from PSTA is to amend the contract with H.W. Lochner for a not-to-exceed amount of $1.85 million to bring the overall contract limit to $3.55 million. And this is still funded through FDOT and PSTA funds, and it's included within the overall project budget. And with that, I think I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Eggers for any feedback from the Finance Committee.
Thank you. Yeah, I think before we do that, we had quite a bit of discussion about it. I think the Finance Committee supported this after the conversation, but what we didn't have is an opportunity. Well, we had the opportunity, but we didn't take advantage of it. And I thought maybe if the engineers could come up and maybe talk a little bit more specifically about the change in the engineering design cost, because it just seems, even with these, it would be better to understand a little bit more about those scope changes, because we are more than doubling the cost of the engineering. So we either really missed it big time, or maybe they can explain a little bit more in the details as to why it's so much different. I think the board would like to hear it, and maybe the folks that are listening.
Absolutely. And maybe I'll invite Tom Stoner. He's the project manager for the H.W. Lochner team, and talk maybe a few details on what changed.
Thank you.
Abhishek. My name's Tom Stoner, and I work for Lochner. I've been there 35 years. I'm also a 49-year resident of Seminole, so I've been in the area a long time. We're blessed to be selected for this project after the planning study was done. It was an excellent planning study, but once we got into the final design, we got all the survey out there. We actually went in the field, boots on the ground, looked at all of this stuff. Plus did the engineering work in our office with regards to the final bus turning routes and whatnot. We looked at all 32 stations. And at the end of the day, we ended up moving, I think, 9 stations to address either issues with how the bus comes in and docks level, because that's a level boarding situation, just to make sure the bus could do this, or working with Abhishek with the public. We got comments with regards to moving a station here or there to accommodate requests from the public as well. And then finally, in a couple cases where the, for example, on 66th Street, where the bus goes from First Avenue North across 66 onto Central Avenue. The original station was sited on Central Avenue. We determined through that, what's called auto turn, how the bus turns, that it was going to be somewhat difficult for the bus to dock up with that station. So we moved it all the way onto 66th Street, which was a much better siting as well, and less impactful to traffic and everything else. So there's, I think, going through the individual 32 stations would take me all day, and I'd be glad to ask or answer other questions.
So from the original estimate of 1.7, even without these changes being done, would it have been adjusted without those changes being addressed? Just trying to get a sense of how good that first contract was versus what the changes have added to it.
Sure, and what I should also mention that we, based on the changes that we had discussed, we also did an independent review of the hours and the fee that it would take to implement those changes. And the independent review also came up with, consistent with what Lochner team is proposing and what we are recommending. But as far as your question about during the planning stage, we did make certain assumptions during the planning stage, mainly because we didn't conduct the survey, we didn't do a whole lot of on-field investigation, which is typically not done during the planning stage. So after that was done by our engineering team, survey team, working with the utility companies to understand where the utilities might be located, we made quite a few adjustments based on that, which was not originally anticipated back when we were negotiating their scope for the first phase.
So when we approved the original 1.7 million, it was for a plan. It was for the plan during the planning phase, not after any engineering and actually
correct.
On-site engineering had been done.
That's correct.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Appreciate it.
Any questions? Any more questions from the board? Commissioner Justice, turn you, okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess that's what I was curious too about the scope changes. And you mentioned 32 stations, we moved 9 stations in that planning. I guess, I don't know if this is for you or for staff. I'm trying to understand our timeline of our role as a board in this process. We're at 30%, 60%. Back in January, we got a more detailed, graphically detailed visual of the plan up and down First Avenue with the stations, station in the middle of the road, or not the middle, but not sidewalk, but will we see that again? Will we vote on that? Is this the final vote? Where are we in the voting process as far as this whole entire project?
Brad?
Abhishek can update what my overall comments. Those are good comments, and I appreciate you asked that previously. So we are putting together sort of a higher level schedule moving forward, so that all the board, and we're revamping our webpage about the project to provide more detail to the community and provide that overall schedule for how we move forward and exactly when the milestones will be. So that right now we are on our way to a 60% design milestone. This contract will take us through final design. I would imagine that we would have a similar thing to like what we did in February. At that time, once we get to the end of the design, and we have a new cost estimate, and some more information, we would have another sort of open house or whatever we call that thing. Obviously, you're going to approve we're going to bid out the construction contract. The board will approve that. You will receive the state and federal funds when they come in, and we'll have a discussion about that. So there's going to be ongoing discussion. We're also launching something I know is near and dear to your heart, a branding or communications and branding piece of the project this summer. So I know that we'll have some input from the board on that as well.
Thank you. And as we've seen, and I mean, again, I'm looking at a PowerPoint from January of this year. It was at an open house, I guess, and it looks different than what I think we're currently at, certainly with the changes at St. Pete Beach. And so I'm just trying to understand that we have different voting spots along the way, and where we can say, I love the concept, but I hate this part of the plan, or I love the plan, but I can't go along with this. So I'm just trying to understand what our role is and that. And speaking of open houses, I guess I want to know, I was curious of what changes came out of those open houses. I know that obviously we had major changes with the city of St. Pete Beach, and I heard you talk to USF, but were there any citizen comments at any of those open houses that said, okay, that's what made our change?
Well, there were a few comments that we did receive, and let me just also say that open house wasn't the only forum that we collected comments. We had a number of neighborhood meetings both in St. Pete and South Pasadena, and we collected a lot of feedback from them. And some of the feedback that we heard from a lot of the neighborhoods for which we made the change was the station design. You referenced the First Avenue stations. There was questions about, well, how would the vehicular traffic know that there's going to be a station up ahead? So we included some safety features at each of those station designs that were not originally in the design. So we added those at every single station along First Avenue North and South. We also wanted to make sure that there were no stations in front of a residence. So we also moved a couple of stations to address that concern. So there are just a couple of examples, but there were other changes that we also made. Another one that I can think of is the traffic signal to cross First Avenue North and South. So if there are stations that are proposed where there is no traffic signal, to include a crosswalk and a traffic signal so that allows for safe crossing of that street. So those are a couple of examples that I can give that we heard from our residents.
And then, I guess the one woman, I mean, I know St. Pete Beach has got the majority of the attention on this project, but the thing I've heard most in my area is the lane issue on First Avenue North and South as far as parking, because there is a significant amount of residential along that way, and so can you address that issue?
Sure, and we work very closely with the city staff, City of St. Pete staff on the parking issue, particularly between the 20th and 31st Street. The city staff did a robust outreach for all the businesses and neighborhoods to understand their usage and their concerns, and based on that, I believe the staff also made some recommendations on the on-street parking versus the bike lanes issue, and we finally agreed that keeping the bike lanes on First Avenue North and South between 20th and 31st Street would be a good way to go. And then at the same time, see if there are other ways we can address on-street parking issues, maybe consolidating some parking at some of the north-south streets to still allow for residents or businesses to be able to use those spots.
And the areas further west on the route?
So the areas west of 31st Street, we will essentially move the bike lanes to Central Avenue from First Avenue. So we will keep all the on-street parking as original as it is today. So there wouldn't be any impacts. The only exception would be at where the stations are. So that location is where we would need about 4 to 5 parking spots to accommodate the station platform.
Okay, so it's not a loss of a lane west of 34th Street?
Well, there's no lane being lost anyways. I think the buses that are using that lane can still be used by cars that are making turns. So there's no lane loss in that definition. But the on-street parking spaces is what I'm referring to, that those might be taken away for where the stations are, which are at major intersections.
Okay. And then I guess the last question someone brought up, when will we have FTA approval? When will we know that they're all in on this?
In the fall.
Yes, so we are continuously working with FTA already. So they did assign a project management oversight contractor that FTA essentially pays for. And so the contractor will oversee the project all the way, not just through design and through funding agreement, but they'll stay all the way through completion of this project. So that's a significant milestone for us to get that contractor to begin that formal oversight. The next steps on this is we are having monthly calls with FTA staff, and essentially they create a roadmap for us to get to a grant agreement. And those roadmap dates are what we're waiting for from FTA, based on the contractor's assessment.
Okay. And then just, I know my questions are all over the place, but as they come in, so if we stop at the county parking lot, assume that you can get agreement with the county on using that space. If someone wants to go south of there, so they get the bus to how will they get to the Hurricane Restaurant from there?
Well, Commissioner Justice, that is St. Pete Beach's issue to deal with. And they have made that very clear that they will provide golf carts or some little thing to pick up people.
I mean, they have a plan for that?
I don't know. You'll have to ask Mayor Johnson.
Okay. Thank you, sir. I appreciate it.
And by the way, the Hurricane isn't the only restaurant down there. There are several businesses that have employees there.
I understand. That's why I asked the question.
Well, thank you. Anybody else? Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, thank you. Abhishek, as we talk about this additional design dollars that we're talking about will get us through the 3 phases of the design process.
Commissioner Eggers, this will only take it to the end of phase 2. So we will still need to amend the contract for construction phase. We will only know what that value would be once we complete design and how much the construction costs would be, because it's a percentage of the construction cost. That will only be known once the...
So the $1.7 million originally was just for phase 1 and 2?
No, it was meant to be for all 3 based on the information we had available at that time. So that's
So
what
we still don't know, that this 3.5 million is not going to be all of the design cost.
No, sir. It's going to be for all of design, but after the third phase is when we start construction. During construction, we usually provide a small task order to the design team to support the construction crew in case things change. So if they're out on the field constructing and they hit a utility pipe, then there might be a different design that would have to accommodate around that pipe. So having the design team at hand is helpful to make sure the contractors can stay on schedule. So usually a task order is issued based on the construction value at that time. So that's why it's not included in the current action today.
That concerns me just a little bit. I didn't realize that we were still going to have additional, quote, design costs or design firm costs. The other question I had is, as it relates to the other capital that we've estimated all along, it's clearly an estimate. We're nowhere near. What's the likelihood of that capital cost changing? And if it does change, to what extent do you think? And who's going to be responsible for that cost if we have those additional? I mean, this is pretty dramatic change in engineering costs from the original. So I just want to make sure, and I understand that planning phase to this phase there is an adjustment, but I don't understand that third phase. And then just concerned overall about how our prices are going to hold.
Absolutely. And one thing I will say is that all along the cost estimates that we have been developing, those are based on the FTA guidelines on depending on which phase of design you're in. FTA usually requires us to include a certain percentage of contingencies to account for, as we develop the design, as we know more about the project, we can adjust the costs accordingly and therefore reduce the contingency. So at this, the $43.93 million cost estimate that I cited, that does include about 30% contingency included in it. And that's in line with what FTA expects at this level of design. So our goal is, as we continue modifying and refining the design, we would know exactly what those bid values, those prices would be, and so we would reduce the contingency and keep the overall cost about the same.
Obviously, at the end of it, it's going to fall on us for whatever additional capital. I'm sure we're not going to get additional monies elsewhere, so it'll probably fall on us. And of course, we have to continue addressing, which is a separate matter, the operating of the system, which we'll deal with that soon because we have the issues that we've talked about before. So I am a little bit concerned about this design change, and now there's going to be a third phase additional number, which I don't really have any concept for. Like, it went from 1.7 to 3.5, and now what's it going to do? Is it going to go to 5.5? I mean, are we talking a couple 100,000? Are we talking? I mean, I think we need to know that when we make these decisions.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. Commissioner Albritton?
Yeah, I have similar concern too. I'd like a little more clarification on that. From the 1.7, that's I mean, we're talking about, well, at least from the 1.85, almost double. And for moving 9 stations, and we're also about 2 miles shorter because we're not doing any right-of-way work down at Don Cesar. So was that already designed and paid for, or it seems to me that we'd be not doing some engineering on that extra work, we'd be saving money, and here we are doubling it. Can we get a little more explanation on exactly what that, double amount is, why that's jumped up so much?
Sure. And Brad, did you want to?
Well, I just wanted to say, I mean, the points that some of the commissioners are making are certainly good points that we also thought when we got the estimate proposal for moving this forward. You would think, as Commissioner Albritton said, that perhaps we would reduce the cost, but actually, all the changes in the city of St. Pete Beach that we have worked with the city to accommodate their requests, those have additional design costs. Those require us to pay more for the design. Now, the overall project will be less because we'll have one less station to build in construction. But the design cost has not gone down because of those changes. It's gone up. As Abhishek mentioned, there's a number of reasons why we are seeing such a large increase in the design fee for this project from the original 1.7 that the board approved last fall. The main reason is because that design estimate back then was based on a planning study that another consultant had done where we hadn't done really any engineering work along the project. So whether or not it was an appropriate number from the get-go at 1.7, is a question. Like Abhishek said, when we got this new estimate, we wanted to make sure that we were very concerned about it. So we got Abhishek got an independent cost estimate, went to another engineering firm to see what they would charge us for the same work, and got right at the same answer. The overall project, even with this big increase, the overall design fee is tested and validated, and it is within the overall budget that we've had that has not changed significantly over the design process. It's still within the overall project estimate. We have had a number of changes like we discussed, but we feel like we've done due diligence to make sure that this is a valid number. Hopefully, as we move forward, I don't know. I don't want to knock on wood. Hopefully there'll be some good things, and maybe we won't have this. Maybe we won't have to spend all that contingency funds, or maybe we will see some savings in design fees. Maybe, right, Don? So, it's certainly something we need to address and monitor. We certainly don't want the non-construction costs to eat up this project budget. As far as getting other funding, that's certainly going to be a challenge. It's not out of the possibility prior to getting a grant agreement with the state or the federal government that the percentages might change. Once we do get a grant agreement with those other entities, then they're locked into what then any increases from then on are our responsibilities. So it's to our advantage. It's to our benefit to have a nice big contingency now, just in case. But over the next several months, as we buy the buses and complete the design and then start the construction, obviously then our risk of further cost increases goes down the further along in the project we get.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the board? Mr. Albritton and Commissioner Eggers, can you shut down your mic, please? Any further questions from the board? All right. Well, we have a few public comment cards on this item. And Mr. Rask, I know you had Dr. Carlson as that you were speaking for him as well, but he is no longer here. And our policy dictates that if we give you extra minutes, the person has to be here. Okay. Dr. Lee Davidson. Davidson. Okay, thank you. You have
Again,
6 minutes.
Tom Rask, unincorporated Pinellas County. I was going to talk about this under 6B, but let me give you a reason right now why to vote no on this, because this is all moot at this point. This small starts project is governed by the FTA's final interim policy guidance, which was published in June of 2016. I alluded to it before. On page 50 of that document, it says, FTA requires that project sponsors obtain commitments of at least 50% of all non-CIG funds within 3 years of a small starts project's advancement into project development. That 3-year date was April 15th. Okay? Now, some of you might think that the 9/7/2017 City of St. Pete resolution was such a commitment. But a plain reading of that resolution shows it wasn't, because if you look at any text after the part where it says, now therefore be it resolved, they don't actually commit any money. Furthermore, this board has yet to commit $6.5 million to the project. So without going through the math, the bottom line is that PSTA has not met this 3-year requirement of non-CIG funds. And I don't know if PSTA is aware of this at this point, but now it is. The policy document, the policy guidance document, further says that if you don't meet this 3-year requirement, quote, the FTA would withdraw the project from the Small Starts program. FTA would withdraw the project. Now, I said in my earlier comments that the FTA doesn't withdraw projects. They're just going to play rope-a-dope with you. You haven't met this 3-year requirement. We, the citizens, are going to hold the FTA's feet to the fire on this issue. It says in their own policy guidance that they would withdraw the project if this 3-year requirement has not been met. Now, I'd love for staff to tell me how this 3-year requirement has been met. And if they do come up here, then they could perhaps also answer the question that was in my email to you, why dedicated lanes? They could have applied for what's called a corridor-based project, but they chose to apply for a fixed guideway project. And you can see even people with pink hair come up here and say they're opposed to the project. I talked to Ms. Holman about this before. I said that many on the PSTA board assume people dressed like her with her hair color would be for this project. No, she's opposed to it because of the dedicated lanes. And they are dedicated lanes because it will be written in the lanes, bus only. How are tourists supposed to know that this is not bus only? How are they supposed to know the turns are allowed? So if PSTA staff does address the question of the 3-year requirement, perhaps they can also address why they didn't apply for a corridor-based, why they didn't put together a corridor-based project. Now, my father was an engineering vice president who worked and lived on 3 continents. He's got me beat. I only have 2 continents. And when I told him about this project, he's in his late 70s, he said, Rule 1 is that you get the funding before you spend any money on planning. The Fort Lauderdale Wave Project, they spent $34 million and counting. That's not the final bill to plan and design a 2.7-mile streetcar, which Fort Lauderdale City Council has since canceled. Don't go down that road. Don't waste million after million after million only to see this project die. It's dying anyway, and we're going to keep up the pressure. So, of course, engineering firms, and I'm not singling out Lochner here, they love this kind of stuff because they get to do engineering work without any significant liability. I'm an engineer myself. I'd love to do design work where it's never implemented because there's never going to be any, really, the liability is very limited for projects where you do engineering and it's never put into action. So, of course, these engineering firms, they lobby Congress for more stuff like this, and then the FTA requires all this design to be done before they even consider you for funding. But this is really putting the cart before the horse. So, could I have, Sharon, the 6A write-up? I also wanted to point out that there's a lot of double talk in this. The write-up for agenda item 6A says, the Central Avenue BRT is funded by a combination of federal, state, regional, and local funds. Funded? Really, when did it get funded? When did it receive a construction agreement? I'm not aware it's funded. So again, please vote no on this item because it's moot anyway. This project's dead, and we're going to keep up the pressure until we have it black and white that it's dead. The 3-year requirement says that you have to have commitments of 50% of the non-CIG funds by 3 years from the date you enter the PD phase, and PSTA has not done it. They screwed up. Staff screwed up on this one, but I'm happy to be told how I'm wrong. Thank you.
Sharon Calvert?
On the agenda item for 6A, as was mentioned, it states that this project is funded by a combination of federal, state, regional, and local funds. I am unaware of any regional funding for this project. The only funding you're seeking are from FTA, FDOT, your own funding, your reserves, and the city of St. Petersburg. Your initial ratings that you got when you submitted, after you submitted your grant request to the FTA, was based, your higher rating was based on St. Pete Beach funding, as well as the route to the Don Cesar. You were also able to use, with your Small Starts grant request, and you can do it, but you used warrants. And those warrants allowed this project to get higher ratings without having, because of the certain criteria associated with this project, that it could get kind of automatic ratings without having to go through some due diligence, including ridership. I did notice on the latest fact sheet dated 6/11 that you've taken your ridership numbers off of that fact sheet. I think there is huge financial risk with this project. Just listening to that previous conversation, this project is a mess, and I'm not sure a bank would give a loan for this project based on the declining financial position. And the operating side of this project, if it ever got implemented, I think will be disastrous for PSTA. You're in a situation now where your costs are increasing. We all need to remember that when you got your grant, you started out at $16.5 million project that is now ballooned 5 years later to $44 million. And regarding this St. Pete Beach, it was said loud and clear, and I do live in Tierra Verde, but Gulf Boulevard is one of my major routes. They are, if I want to go north, that's it. The trolley today, the wheels, that road is so narrowed because they narrowed the road, expanded the bike lane. The trolley runs in the bike lane. It is a danger today, especially with the tourists who are darting around, whether they're walking or trying to get by a bus. And putting a bus on that road, I think, is going to be a danger for everyone, for cyclists, for pedestrians, and for other vehicles. So I ask that you vote no. Thank you.
Thank you. Barbara Hazelton?
Yes, Barbara Hazelton. As a part of the FTA grant application, there's a section that talks about the overall condition. PSTA is warranting or saying or guaranteeing that PSTA, one of the bullet points would be that the agency is in good financial condition. And I think that that, of course, is in strong debate, even through media that you've done yourself over the last few months, which I think is working its way up to the idea of a referendum down the road. It's very difficult to say you have financial problems while at the same time you're saying elsewhere that you don't have financial problems. It is very disingenuous because I keep track of these numbers and I watch the meetings. And in this FTA application, you said that by 2022, that PSTA was going to be $8 million in deficit. That was in the representations to the FTA. Now we're talking about $12 million in deficit by 2022. You have said all along for this entire year that you were going to be $1.5 million dipping into reserves this year and $3 million next year. And yet, during the planning meeting the other day, the CFO said everybody got into their desk drawers and into their pockets, and they found all kinds of change laying around, that they were going to be able to reduce the deficit, which I thought was very interesting at this crucial time with FTA, that you're going to make this deficit disappear for this year. And here I have the slide showing the list that CFO Leos put together, showing facilities maintenance, finance, fleet maintenance, general function, human resources. Everybody was going to tighten their belt. And she shows a bottom line on these savings of $1 million. And to Commissioner Gerard's credit, she said, wait a minute, That doesn't add up to $1 million. And of course, I grabbed my calculator at my office, and I started adding up these numbers from the CFO of PSTA, who is also putting together all the numbers on the grant application and on all other numbers that are being represented to the public and to the FTA, and the sum was $1.8 million. So this $1 million bottom line has been erroneously calculated, and it's $1.8 million, but I know this board will end up saying, well, isn't this wonderful? Now we're in the black. No, this is a mistake. How can the public trust this kind of mistakes? And we don't know where anything really is true. We have 30 to 40 people in this county who are driving these conversations, and the referendum on Greenlight Pinellas showed that up to the very moment of that referendum, you all thought you were going to win. 62% of the public said no. 38% were with you. And that was, interestingly, mainly St. Petersburg. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Now, Mr. Barkley nor Mr. Schulman, you're on finance, correct, David?
We already talked about that. We talked about the finance supported it, and that's why I said that at the beginning.
Right.
He said that to me. And then we went to the additional questions. So I do have some additional questions, and if you give me just a minute, Madam Chair.
Sure.
There were some comments that were made this morning, okay? And I guess the idea here is to not address them as we make a decision on moving the design costs forward. And I don't think it hurts us to be able to say that if 3 years ago, we were supposed to have certain things done by the 3-year mark in April, and we didn't, what the implication is. Because, there's a statement that was made today, and I frankly, I can't argue with it because I don't really know. So I would really like to hear a little bit from our CEO on that.
Okay, let's take your questions one at a time.
That one?
So they don't all run together.
That's fine.
So we all can keep track?
Fine.
Is that all right?
That's fine.
Okay. Brad, can you address that piece, please?
I have received emails or other things about Mr. Rask's claim about the 3-year window. I don't have an answer for you exactly because it's very technical. I've been told by our consultants that we have met the requirements of the FTA. I've been told by the FTA that we have met all the requirements. Beyond that, I'll have to get you, I have to do some more research into all the FTA rules and regulations to get you and the citizens a proper answer to that question. But I've been assured that we have not missed any deadlines.
And you have that from the FTA in writing, I'm sure.
Yes. Well, we have, as Abhishek mentioned, we have a monthly phone call with the FTA. And I'm not sure if we have the answer to that specific question in writing. I don't want to say something that's not, perfectly accurate. That's why I just know that we continue to have these meetings. They assigned a risk consultant. We have not missed any deadline.
So,
what's your next question?
Okay, the next question was really trying to get back to the third phase of engineering, because when we had this conversation in our finance group, and correct me, I apologize if I missed it, but I thought this was going to get us through that third phase, and so I misunderstood that. So I think, again, just from a sense of 1.7 originally was the planning phase estimate of the 3 phases of engineering. Now it's 3.5 million just for phase 1 and 2. And so I have no idea. Are we talking about another 1.8 million? Are we talking about another $100,000 for phase 3 of engineering design? And I think it just goes to the issue of where are we on our cost estimates that were done not a year ago, probably 2 years ago or whatever that time frame is, and how is that moving forward? And you addressed a little bit, there might be some additional funding available to make up some of the shortfall because of changing in pricing, but I just have to have a sense of that. I mean, I just don't have any feel for what that third phase is. I really thought we were done. And I could justify it from the standpoint that one was planning and now we're into engineering, but now I'm a little bit concerned.
Commissioner Eggers, I think you raised 3 points from your question. One is what's the design services during construction look like, and is that going to be at the same magnitude that we're talking about today for phase 1 and 2? I think the second question, what I heard was the cost estimates, how those are getting developed, and what changed from what was developed a couple of years ago from what we have today. And I believe the third question is how do we keep track of all the changes that we're making and how that impacts the overall project?
Yeah, I think overall it just comes down to confidence in numbers and how they're changing so dramatically. So if you're talking about another 1.8 million, you've gone from 1.7 probably to about 5.3 million just on engineering design, assuming that happens.
Well, I can tell you that the level of work that we're talking about in this phase would not be what we're going to be talking about for the third phase.
Oh, I thought you just said 1.8 million. I apologize for the construction design phase.
No.
Okay.
No, what I'm saying is the 1.8 million will essentially complete all of the design, and then the third phase is more of a support role, supporting the contractors.
I understand.
In case any eventuality, anything comes up, then the design team is at hand to provide any design support. Because they have to be signed and sealed, we have to develop those construction drawings for the contractors to actually build as and when needed. So that effort is more of a support role rather than the lead role that we're talking about for the second phase. So my understanding is based on the work we're talking about, it's going to be a much lesser effort in the third phase than what we're talking about in the second phase. So we don't anticipate a similar magnitude of a change order going forward into a third phase when we do start construction. But as far as the exact amount or what that amount would be, that would only be known once we've completed design and we truly understand what the construction cost is going to be. Because it's really based on the construction value after we complete all the necessary design.
Okay. I mean, those construction value estimates are known.
Well, they're known based on the design we have currently.
Right.
But the construction value gets changed or updated as and when we do more investigation out on the field, do more design, get the bid prices in. And the other thing I should also mention is a lot of things have changed since we started planning as we're doing design. There's a lot of development happening along the corridor, along First Avenue North and South, in downtown. Our design team has to work around those developments too. So those designs also have to be reflected in our project. The other thing I also want to mention is other stakeholders, the city of St. Pete. There was mention at the St. Pete Beach Commission last time that there's some sewer work and undergrounding of electrical utilities that also is in the plans. All of that has to be factored into our designs work. So there's a lot of things that have changed since the time we completed planning. And so all of that has to be kept up to date, and we are keeping it up to date to make sure we have a true estimate when we...
And I think I appreciate those comments as it relates to this 1.8 million that we're talking about, and really what we're voting on today. So there is an amount of the value of the contract right now that's going to dictate some level of phase 3, whatever you want to call it, because I called it engineering, because you said it was phase 1, 2, and 3. At the current, even though that might change, there is some amount now that you could probably estimate, or at least the engineers could estimate, based on the value of the contract today, which may be different. And that's a whole other issue that I think people are a little concerned about, is that evolving price, because not anybody's fault, but time changes.
And part of that, Commissioner Eggers, is what makes transportation projects, not only here, but all over the country and in the world, so difficult, because there are so many state and federal requirements that lay over what we're doing, and they're very finite in terms of the time that it takes. I mean, you can't even get into the process for 5 to 6 or 7 years. I mean, this is not a project that just started yesterday. We've been working on this for a long time. And the longer it takes,
Yeah,
It's
the good, bad, and ugly with that whole
it is.
process, I get it.
It's not easy, and it's very, very complicated. So thank you for trying to help us all understand it so well, Abhishek. I think we're all learning more about this than we ever thought we would. Okay, are we in a posture now to move forward, a motion?
Well, question?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. At what point, and I know it sounds like I'm going back to the same question, but at what point, we saw this beautiful design, at what point will we have a final design? Because it's changed dramatically with your all's negotiations with St. Pete Beach and that kind of thing. So at what point would we see an actual design that we'll know what it actually looks like? And are there more potential for changes along the way?
Well, I mean, as we continue to advance the design, the focus is narrower. So we're basically only refining the elements of the design. So our plan is to have open houses at every single design milestone. So we had open houses that you referenced back in February after we completed 30% design. We'll also have open houses after 60% design, which will happen in August. September timeframe, and then also at 90% and completion of design. So our goal is to make sure we're showing the latest design to the public with the intent that it's really refining those elements as opposed to completely overhauling the project, which is really why the first phase was added, to make sure we're going in the right track. We talk to community members, we talk to the stakeholders, and really understand and make any refinements as we need, so that going forward, as we start getting into the detailed design, we're only making refinements.
And then I guess I share Commissioner Egger's concern about the 3-year issue that we don't have a technical answer for today. And then the other thing I'm wondering is that the dais is looking pretty empty today on a pretty major issue.
There's 8 of us here today.
Well, what is the wish of the board? We have action items here. What is your? Well, I'm just asking.
Us?
We got a quorum?
Yes, I'm asking you.
Yes.
We do have a quorum.
Well, I have a comment. I was thinking the very same thing that Commissioner Justice said, and I certainly hope, because I will not support any project, this project going forward, any other phase, if we're not going to have a reasonably good number here on the dais. And, you know, whatever that is, it's got to be at least 75%. And I'm not talking about for a quorum, but, I mean, this project right now, to keep this project going, something that we've talked about for years, I think it's important, because of the planning phase to the design phase, to support this 1.8 million. But I got to tell you something, I'm not happy with the answer I got on the engineering, the 3rd phase. I still don't know what that is. And, you know, quite frankly, this is a big deal. And there are a lot of comments that are being made today and answers that I'm not comfortable with. So, you know, guys, this is when it starts to, you know, everything starts to funnel down with decisions. And I think it's really important. It's really important that as we get there, the devil will be in those details. And we have to be really on our game. And I mean that not in a playful way like game, but just on our game when we start coming down the home stretch here, because it's our residents. I'm not talking about maybe some folks that have expressed concern today, though I appreciate those observations, but for our residents, we have to be on, and those details are critically important. So I just want to make sure that not only are we making every effort to get our, you know, a larger contingent here for a vote on a critical issue like this, but that we really focus on some of those details that are being asked. So thank you, Madam Chair, for letting me rant a little bit.
Well, I'm a bit worried that if we delay this vote to lock in this where we are today, I'm looking at you, Dawn, because I've known you for so long. Is there anything that you want to add to this conversation, given your vast experience in the world of transportation? Please come forward, state your name, and
Don Skelton, representing H.W. Lochner. Thank you, Chair, for overstating my qualifications with my vast experience. Let me just touch on a couple things. First, talk about the schedule. Yes, it's important to keep this project moving to meet some of these deadlines. A lot of what's been talked about here is getting to that full funding grant agreement. You got to get to some stages in design to get there. And so that becomes important. And yes, the construction estimates, the further you get into the design, the better handle you have because you've narrowed your focus, your scope. There's two things that cause cost estimates to go up. One is what we refer to in the industry as scope creep. You start with an idea of a project, and by the time you get enough chefs in that kitchen and bake it a little bit further, somebody has added a little bit here, and so this will make the project better, this will make the project better, this will make the project better. That's what can cause that. The other is the economy. That's a unit price thing. That's going to be a function of whatever the unit prices do. So that's some of the unknown and why you put a contingency that Brad talked about into these estimates, because you want to account for some of the economic unknowns. To address the other two things that I heard, and Abhishek can kick me later or tell me never to show up to another meeting again. There was one item that probably caused the total design estimate to go higher than the 1.7, because when you looked at the original 1.7 estimate, and we all thought that that was, based on the planning, a good number, there was a separate line item that was survey that was not part of the 1.7, if I recall that right. Didn't catch that until we got into this phase 2. So we spent a lot of money on the survey in phase 1 that caused this total number of the design to go up. As you make some of the changes that were made with the station moves and those types of, some people might think, hey, station move, that's just drawing a line on a map somewhere. We have to resurvey, you have to do the regrading, you have to do a lot of the engineering details. So moving stations sounds easy, but there's some design costs that go into that. The other thing, the last point I want to make, and I think this goes to Commissioner Eggers, your point of that phase 3. And the reason there's some uncertainty is even once you know what the final construction estimate is, even when you sign the contract with the contractor, I can't stand up here and tell you what the number for post-design services is. I can give you a range. We can be talking a few $100,000, $200,000 to $300,000. You can be talking $600,000 to $700,000. It's going to depend on a few things. Do you want the engineer of record at every construction meeting? Well, there's a cost. If you're going to do a weekly construction meeting and the engineer of record's got to be at every one of those meetings, that's going to be a function of that cost. Is there something that happens during construction? Abhishek talked about it. Is there a change condition where you had the information of where the utility was, but the utility wasn't where you said it was, or where somebody said it was? Now you've got to do some redesigns. Well, you got to sign and seal it. And then the other component is you're going to do shop drawings. The contractor's going to do shop drawings of various things, and the engineer of record reviews those. So again, I don't think you're talking about $1.5 million for that phase 3. I don't think you're talking about $1 million for that phase 3. I really think you're talking about, and this I think is what you wanted, was somewhere from a couple $100,000 to it could be $700,000. Tom, is that a good assessment? From my experience, that's where I see things. Madam Chair, I don't know if that answered your question.
Well, I think it's helpful to hear that finite explanation. Is that helpful to you, Commissioner Eggers?
Well, it gives me at least some sense of.
Yeah, me too.
A cap.
And I want to the point that Commissioner, I think it was Commissioner Justice and you, Commissioner Eggers, made about the lack of our attendance today for the board meeting, I think it's important to share that 4 of the absent commissioners today voted on to recommend this to go forward at the Finance Committee last week. So in essence, they have stated their preference to move the project forward. So I think at this time, I'd like to have a motion to move the project forward, and let's take a vote.
Move approval.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Would you open the voting clock, please, Rachel? Who was not vote? Who was not up for? All right, and that passed unanimously. Thank you very much. So, moving on to our funding agreement with the City of St. Petersburg. Abhishek.
Good morning again, Madam Chair, members of the board, and also just talking about the second important milestone that we achieved with in partnership with the City of St. Petersburg Council. The City of St. Pete approved unanimously a funding agreement to support the Central Avenue BRT project for $4 million, and which will be used for design and construction of the BRT facilities along the corridor. The funding has certain requirements. It has to be spent within a certain area. Since the funding is drawn from those specific funding districts, which are the in-town CRA and the District 11A. And generally, that's the area between downtown St. Pete and 34th Street. And we believe that we have sufficient facilities planned and designed along that area to meet that $4 million requirement. So not only does that meet the requirement that FTA has to secure the local funding commitment, but it also reaffirms our true partnership with City of St. Pete staff. They truly have been partners on this project. We've worked very collaboratively with them on this, and so it definitely shows the support on this project. So with that, the recommendation is to approve a funding agreement with City of St. Pete for $4 million. And I would turn it over back to the board for any planning committee reports.
Okay. Okay, and so before we move forward on this issue, we have a public comment from Mr. Rask that wants to speak to the issue. Thank you, Abhishek. We'll call you back in a moment.
Yes, thank you, Tom Rask, Unincorporated Seminole. Just point of order, it would be better if there was a motion, if you heard the discussion and know what we're commenting on. Because right now we're commenting on, I don't know what. There's no motion on the floor. So just something to consider. Also here for this item, 6B, it says in the write-up, the project is funded through Federal Transit Administration. Really? When was it funded? I'd like to know the date. In fact, I'll make a public records request right now for any records that show that it is funded through the Federal Transit Administration, because that is the claim in the write-up. That is what's being represented to the citizens. In the previous item, I strongly urged you to not waste over $1.8 million of the taxpayers' dollars on further engineering work on a dubious project, but the board saw it differently and voted to commit that money to be spent on this project. It's now clear that Mr. Miller is aware of the letter that went to the FTA on June 10th, where I authored the letter. It was signed by various neighborhood associations and also by longtime activists and group leaders. A number of things were brought up in that letter, not just the lack of the of meeting the 3-year requirement. You also have the issue here with the St. Pete agreement. The St. Pete funding agreement allocates money to specific geographic areas of the project. And we don't believe that is legal, because you allocate money to the project. So this is another problem you have with this funding agreement with St. Pete. And I see Ms. Darden Rice shaking her head. And so I guess that's something that's been discussed by their attorneys, that they've received legal advice from in the St. Pete City Council. But I wanted to bring that up because it would set a very bad precedent if the FTA allowed this. It would mean that a project could be completed, there is funding available, except the funding's not available for the right area. So we've asked the FTA to reject that kind of reasoning. The money is being allocated into specific CRA areas, and that's bad public policy. This funding agreement is something you should also vote no on. It's bad public policy, as I said. There are things in there, too, where St. Pete, in their previous resolution, they say they support this project, and I'm looking for the text here, something to the effect of road improvements. Well, that's not, if the city of St. Pete thinks that it's supporting the project by keeping the roads in a state of good repair, that's not a financial contribution. Anyway, I have 5 more minutes. I'm not going to take those 5 minutes because I see that it's not the board's desire to raise any substantive questions about the spending of money. It wants to go the same way of the WAVE project in Fort Lauderdale, where, again, $34 million. That's over $10 million a mile, a line that was never built and counting. And that's where this project is going to go. So I ask you, perhaps in vain, to reject this funding agreement, study the project more, and vote on these things when you have more people present here. Another point I want to make is Chairman Long said that the people in the, I believe, Finance Committee had voted to support the previous agenda item. They had voted before they had all the information before them. The purpose of public comment is to hear from citizens who I truly believe have a lot of information. The lady who came up here, Tara Holman, before, brought up a lot of points I hadn't thought of. Hopefully it's things you hadn't thought of either. There's a reason that Article 1, Section 1 of the Florida Constitution says all political power is inherent in the people. It doesn't mean we elect you and then you go do your thing. It means you listen to us. I wanted to make that point that they voted to move this forward to the entire board. They didn't, if they wanted to vote for this, for 6A, the previous item, they should have showed up today and voted. But maybe there's a reason they didn't want to be here today. Maybe they didn't want to be on the record. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. It is my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, because the chair is no longer here. She had another meeting that she had to go to. But the PSTA Planning Committee unanimously recommended approving the agreement with St. Petersburg. Correct, Brad?
That's correct.
And I'm assuming, Darden, you're prepared to speak to that? Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. On behalf of the mayor and the unanimous vote of my colleagues on St. Pete City Council, we fully supported this grant, and this represents a culmination of years of work and outreach on this project, as we have well established. We see this as an important investment in a regional project that will benefit the entire county as well as St. Petersburg. The previous speaker had made reference to some issues of some of the money being applied towards a certain geographic area. That's really because of the TIF funding, which requires that the funding that comes from that TIF district goes back into that TIF area. So there's nothing particularly nefarious about that. That's pretty straightforward. So I wholeheartedly move to approve this interlocal funding agreement with the City of St. Petersburg in the amount of $4 million.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Yes, Commissioner Eggers.
Councilman Bryce, the comment that was made and the, I guess, erroneous statement here that the project is funded, the council knows full well, I guess, when they made this vote, that the project hadn't been funded by the FTA, I'm assuming.
I certainly understand that the federal part of it has not come through yet, but that we are on track with good communication with them, and that the project is ranked very highly, and that there's actually the local contribution, in part coming from the city, is one of the steps that needs to take place before the 50% federal funding comes through.
It's fine, I just want to make sure, because the statement here does say that it was funded, and as long as you all were clear on that, that was really my question, so, thank you.
Okay, Rachel, would you please open the voting card? Okay, and that was a unanimous vote. Thank you so much. Okay, Brad, and the bus barriers. Al, would you please come forward?
Let me just go ahead and introduce.
Sure, absolutely.
Before I pass it on to our procurement director, Al Burns, regarding the purchase of safety barriers, I just want to acknowledge the PSTA staff who responded to our discussion at last month's board meeting, where we heard from our employees that were represented by the SEIU union, the bus drivers, and the board asked us to move with haste to ensure that all of our employees are continually kept safe. Immediately following the board meeting, our Chief Operating Officer, James Bradford, held a meeting with our union, our bus drivers, and we invited Hart's bus operators to come and their management team as well, and presented to try to see if we could reach an agreement with our employees on the best kind of bus barrier shield to purchase. They did a great job talking about all the different kinds that are out there and reaching an agreement on a specific kind of design of what the shield should look like. And then our finance team, led by Debbie Leas, did a great job in identifying capital funding that we can allocate to this project. And then Al, as he's about to explain, did a fantastic job, and his procurement team as well, in fast-tracking a procurement process that met all the different requirements that we have to meet, and able to bring this back to the board in just 1 month. That we are moving forward with buying these protecting shields for our employees, which I think is a really a great thing we just want to make sure that all of our employees feel very safe in where they do their job. So Al, go ahead.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Al Burns, Director of Procurement, board members. First off, I want to thank Brad, the CEO, and James Bradford for allowing me to do my job. As a procurement professional, sometimes you get pushed to do things, and I was pushed to do things correctly. I'd like to talk about the procurement process that we went through. On June 12th, we did an IFB for brand name or equal procurement. And what that does, that allows for competition. And as a procurement professional, there's nothing more important than competition. As Brad indicated, the solicitation contained all the required state and federal clauses for future funding options. On June 17th, we had a pre-bid conference where we had approximately 7 different vendors participate in that conference. One vendor in particular was a locally owned manufacturer That's right here in Pinellas County. On June 21st, we received 2 bids. We received one from Complete Coach Works in the amount of $1.4 million, and we received another bid from Aftermarket Parts, whose bid was at $1.1 million. I'd like to comment that Aftermarket Parts Company LLC has committed a 19% DBE goal to this project. After the bids were opened, we did a technical review, and the aftermarket company bid was determined to be technically acceptable. If you could show a picture of the rendering. In front, on the monitors, you'll see a picture of what was included in the solicitation. I have gotten a written confirmation from the company that they intend on meeting all the technical requirements that were outlined in the solicitation. We've done a responsibility check on Aftermarket Parts Company. We're currently doing business with them on a weekly basis. They have the capacity to perform the work and are therefore eligible for award. The fiscal impact for this project currently is funded by PSTA's capital reserve funds, but as I indicated earlier, we left all the state and federally required clauses in for future funding options as they may come available. In closing, the recommendation is approve a contract with Aftermarket Parts Company, LLC, in an amount not to exceed $1.2 million. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So I have a quick question, if you don't mind. With that barrier installed the way it shows on that little schematic, does that allow for the driver to receive air conditioning in that space where he is now going to be driving?
I will defer to Henry on that.
Thank you. Henry? Good morning.
Yes, the buses have what are called booster blowers for the operators. They have their own vent system in the operator's compartment. But after installation, if they do require some additional airflow, we can certainly look at providing some additional fans or something.
Okay, because it really is hot out right now.
It does.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions? Yes, Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, Henry, don't get too far, just maybe a couple of comments from you on this. The design, well, was up there, but the too big or too small of a design, right? So if it's too big, obviously, because when I went out there to look at it, I'm assuming it's going to be like the one that was out there on the bus last month. It seemed like it would help in not allowing any surprises to the bus driver. In other words, once they've passed by him, he doesn't have to worry about, or he or she doesn't have to worry about behind them. But it doesn't do a whole lot if somebody wants to come in front of, right? I mean, because it seemed like there was a big gap. So I'm sure that we thought about, and you met with the union and everything, so we thought about a little bit bigger area, but then you have the other restrictions. So just a comment as to the trade-off between, you know, maybe going further versus what you decided on.
Okay. So yes, at the pilot design, you saw how that the glass was curved at a 45-degree angle. And when we spoke with our union, they said there is a possibility that people could reach over. The picture that you see before you, it is a rendering. The sliding glass, and that's what it does, it slides from left to right. So interaction with the passenger isn't completely lost. The operator can slide it back. The sliding glass actually goes as far as the fare box, and you can see where on the screen there is kind of like this indentation, and that glass slides over the fare box. So the glass does not go all the way to the windshield, but it is farther forward so that the operators and our union felt that that was sufficient to accomplish what the end result is.
Okay, and then the other, during our finance meeting, I think there was a comment about whether it's bulletproof or not, and we didn't want to really make too many comments on it, thinking that the bidders might offer up a higher standard. I think I heard you say that they're going with the standard that was in the RFP, which I'm assuming is not bulletproof. And then the final thing is, with the union, do we have a policy in place now to address their using this versus not, having the, I guess, the choice to use it? I mean, are we, or is that kind of a work in progress?
Work in progress.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thank you.
Commissioner Albritton?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. It looks like, is this small pane of glass behind the curved one, is that already there on a bus? And this curved piece is added to it, and does that slide back and forth?
No, nothing in the rendering except for the fare box exists on a bus. So no, the door. Could you put that?
There you go.
This whole entire assembly does not exist on the bus today.
Okay, why is that separated though? Is that forward glass slide back?
So this is a stationary.
Yes.
thing, and this here will slide back and forth.
I see.
Oh, okay.
And this partition right here will be added. So the whole thing functions as a door with a sliding window.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Anyone else on this side? No questions? Rachel, would you please put, oh, I'm sorry. We need a motion in a second.
Move approval?
Second.
Thank you.
Ask the final question, I'm sorry.
Of course.
Sorry, I understood you to say that we were going to use reserves, our capital reserves to pay for this. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
That is correct, sir.
So no, and will we make that decision where the money comes from, or is that just going to be an executive?
Debbie's, well, she's knows where the money is. Debbie?
Morning, Board. The money is going to be coming from a project in next year's budget. It is specifically the Clearwater Intermodal Station, where we had money set aside as a matching fund for a discretionary grant that we've applied for. We don't know that we'll be getting that discretionary grant, but I had that capital reserve as a placeholder, and this is clearly a much greater priority than building another facility at this point.
Thank you very much.
So Deb, you didn't like my diesel bus purchase this year to come up?
I actually loved it so much, we'll be making an order for 20 diesel buses that are trolleys. They'll be going up and down Gulf Boulevard to replace our old diesel buses. So it'll be much cleaner, and we'll now have a single branded type trolley going all the way with the Jolly Trolley, our trolley. So, thank you.
With the buses I was speaking of, but thank you for bringing it.
Okay. We have a motion and a second, and so would you please open the voting card? All right, that was a unanimous vote. Thank you very much, Al. And now we have Debbie that's going to talk a little bit about. And are you in a place, Debbie, where you can speak to that issue that Mrs. Hazelton was talking about?
If you don't mind, I'd be happy to address it as I go through the presentation.
Okay.
And I'm actually very pleased that she brought that up.
There you go. Okay.
Today, we're going to be talking about our draft operating budget of $86 million for next fiscal year. And the focus on our budget next year is going to be on continuing to collaborate on transportation policy and priority settings, as well as we've talked quite a bit about developing and continuing to develop financial partnerships for the long run in our financial stability. One of the things is we've just talked about on a lot of different things today. When we come to the board, it's very detail-oriented. whether it's the parts on the bus, whether it's the diesel fuel that we're buying, whatever it may be, we get into the details. So I wanted to take a step back today and say, let's just really take a look. What is PSTA doing? Well, we do quite a bit. We run about approximately 210 buses, over 40 routes. We run 13.6 million revenue miles, along with 892,000 hours of service. We provide a lot of passenger amenities, shelters, bike racks, benches. We run 2 park and rides. We have 14 transit hubs, 4 customer service centers that are manned. We, of course, have our paratransit service. And as you can tell by my little friends here on the bench waiting for the next bus, our customers love us, and we know that because of the surveys that we do in the community throughout the year. So we do quite a bit, and I want to talk a little bit about how we develop the budget, because it's based on what we're doing in this fiscal year and the history of what we've done, and we build on it for the next fiscal year. As you know, we had a budgeted deficit of $1.7 million for this year. You, the board members, came to us and said, we'd really like you to work very hard to try to reduce that. And we have done so. Now, to Ms. Hazelton's point, she is absolutely correct. At the Finance Committee, we showed a $1 million sort of net savings that we're going to have. As you can see on the list, and it was confusing, I've listed out all of the significant savings, which does add up to about $1.8 million. We do still have budgeted deficit areas in the authority, one of which is in transportation. We have had overtime issues, which we have addressed. The HR department has done a phenomenal job at having class after class of operators, so that we're now reducing what we have in our overtime areas going forward. But it isn't, now I will say this, if you see me running down the hallway, and I've said this for years, it's because I am chasing a nickel down the hallway. But reasons we are having some of these savings is because we're changing, and we continue to change how we do business. We have locked in prices not just in fuel, but in other areas where we traditionally see increases, such as our software maintenance agreements. That's a big area that has a lot of money to it. We have taken our funding and used it in a different manner, such as for facility maintenance. Instead of using FTA funds to buy the parts, we're using our own funds. That saves us a significant amount of money. We have held some positions open on the administrative side to help save money, both in salaries and benefits. We have done things such as combining our procurements with other transit agencies, as well as taking some of our procurements and bundling them together, which we did as a pilot program this year on our inventory, and found that we had great savings. We're going to bring that out to all of our inventory parts. So we are doing quite well this year, and I'm very proud of the fact that everybody has coalesced around that. We have also had, while we've been busy saving some money, we have also had a lot of accomplishments. We've won national awards in marketing and for our fleet maintenance. We've put our electric buses out on the road. We've developed the Healthy Hop and Tarpon. We have mobility on demand, and those rides have increased to new levels. As you've heard today, the BRT is increasing and is progressing, and one of the ways we can save money is by winning discretionary awards. We have awards for transit-oriented development. The electric buses have been a huge help. We just got another grant for that, as well as we just got a grant for innovative, coordinated access and mobility. So the board has also maintained service. That's one of our goals for next year. And when we started with this slide, I told the Finance Committee this story. Brad and I had a blank slide in front of us, and we said, what did we do this year? And we said, well, we met a lot. Everybody at the management team level and everybody else, all we were is meetings. But really what it was positive collaboration. And as you can see, we've met with the county. Those are regular meetings, and Forward Pinellas. City of St. Pete, great funding partner for us, both with the Art and Transit and the Bus Rapid Transit. FDOT, they has in their work program $9.5 million for the BRT. FTA has been very collaborative. These awards I'm talking about with the discretionary grants are from FTA. I've been doing a lot with T-BARTA. That's my second life. The City of Clearwater, which has been a great partner for the spring break, and for helping us fund some of the shelters on the south side by the roundabout. And of course, you've heard from our SAIU members. They have been great partners throughout the year. So we started out with a blank slide. We ended up with a lot of accomplishments. So let's build on those accomplishments for this year into next year's budget for improving on our efficiencies in our service. And in order to do so and to maintain service, we're using a very small portion of our reserves to meet the operating budget of $86 million. What I want to do today, which is a little different than the past, I'm going to take a look at the budget from two viewpoints, one of which is the expense element categories. 60% of our budget is with the wages and with wages and fringe benefits. The other big piece is our purchase transportation. What I mean by that is we have contracts with Jolly Trolley, and the Looper, and Care Ride for our DART program. The next big area is our diesel fuel, which is about $5.5 million. One of the things I like to do is say, what can we really manage versus what we can't? A good part of me says we can manage everything, but I don't have control over the entire world, so that's really not true. One of the things is as we do negotiations with the unions, we take a look at our projected 5-year plan to see how those contracts play out, and we do it within that budget. So those things are locked in usually for several years. We have our Jolly Trolley contracts, Care Ride contracts. Once we've locked in for a number of years. Diesel fuel. I do lock in prices underneath our budget, and that's what I work towards. However, for that unhedged portion, I don't have control over the oil market, much as I want to try. Utilities, I may go around the building, and people have seen me do this, not only here, but in other facilities. I turn off lights if things aren't being used. So I try to save us some money there, but I don't have control over utility rates. Things we do at PSTA have control over, well, we could defer maintenance on our buses, but then we wouldn't be providing the quality service that our customers demand and deserve. We have a transit asset management plan I talked about last month here at PSTA. All transit agencies do. But our greatest asset is not in our buses or in our facilities or in our equipment. It's in our employees. So while I could defer training and development, that is not the best path to go forward on. Of course, I've mentioned we've held off filling some positions to save some money, et cetera. And marketing, I think Commissioner Eggers, you've mentioned that in the past we want to build our ridership, those choice riders, and to do so, we need to have marketing campaigns to do that. So out of our $86 million, I estimate about 85% of it is really kind of out of my control at any one given time. I do want to take a look at it from a different point this year. We looked at it from the expense element category, but this is from by division. What I'm going to do today is not go through every division, but at least go through the top 3 or 4 for you. Starting with finance down the list, if you add all that back up together, we're the support groups for the operations and the fleet and facilities groups. And if you add it all together, we come up less than what those top ones are combined. So operations, our biggest division, $37.3 million in next year's budget. We have up to 390 operators running over 40 routes. We have our customer service representatives, as well as safety and training and security. In this picture, you'll see Eric Gerhardt, along with Commissioner Driscoll. And Eric Gerhardt is a fairly new employee who was caught by a citizen on camera doing something very nice and helping one of our customers, an elderly lady. Our maintenance team. Our maintenance team is responsible not only for the 200-plus buses that we have, but for all our support vehicles as well. One of the things that makes us one of the lowest cost transit authorities in the country is we have trained our mechanics to be manufacturer warranty certified. So we don't have to, from an efficiency standpoint, send our buses somewhere else to get fixed. We can do that in-house. And this has been our award-winning team. This is the picture from the latest APTA. So we are saving a lot of money and time in what we do in the fleet maintenance group. Some things are best to outsource rather than doing in-house. So we do outsource some of our routes to Jolly Trolley and the Looper. We have Care Ride providing the service for our paratransit community. Now, the finance division, from a dollar standpoint, is the largest division of the support groups. The money comes into us, and the money flows and goes out through us. We do quite a bit, as you can see on here, but we are no less important than our smaller groups of HR, planning, marketing, IT. We mentioned last month we talked about the capital program in a lot of detail. This coming year, you just made a vote on the operator safety shields. That'll be an accomplishment we know going forward, as well as anticipating going through starting the construction for the rapid transit system. And we have our bus replacements, and they will be replacing 16 trolleys with 20 vehicles to give us 4 spares. So how is all of this operations funded? The biggest piece is our property tax, or ad valorem, at 62%. That's around $53 million in next year's budget. Our fare box revenues, we've been seeing increases in the fare box revenues, which I'm thrilled about, and that accounts for about 12% of the revenues coming in. And then we get a lot of money from the state as well in the form of block grant and also operating revenues for some of our routes. One thing I'd like to point out, our federal grants is a small piece of this, and for those board members who haven't been here that long, we have maintained that dollar amount since 2012 at the same amount so that we can put that money into assets, federally funded assets that will last a number of years. So how does this play out for the future? We've seen this graph before. I call it my popsicle chart. But let me just remind you what the numbers mean. At the top of each bar, those are proposed expenses for operations. The big green piece is our normal revenues that come in to support those operations. And the little tiny slivers of yellow is where we are using our reserves to meet the operating needs. And you can see the importance of why the funding partnerships are important going forward. So our takeaways from today is we are doing much better than we had anticipated, and we appreciate the board constantly pushing us to do better and raising the bar. Our forecast for next year and the years beyond build on those savings that we have today and those that we've had in the previous years. And again, thank you to the board for maintaining the service to the whole community. And our capital plans are right where we need them to be, focused on our bus replacements and our needs going forward. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
So before we take questions, I just want to remind everyone that in 2022, that red piece up there, I'm very hopeful that between now and then, we will have that figured out, number one. Number two, I want to remind all of you that our funding solution workshop is on July 18th. And if any or all of you are available to come to that, I think it will be very informative and help to frame your thought process going forward on this board. The intent is to have Forward Pinellas, PSTA, T-BARTA, the county at the table. Correct, Brad? Who did I leave out? Were you listening?
I was listening.
Okay.
I don't think I've seen an agenda for the meeting.
Well, we don't have an agenda, but that's the idea, is that we get all the transportation entities involved in the conversation. There'll be I know that Barry Burton, the county administrator, and Whit Blanton from Forward Pinellas and Brad have been meeting every 2 weeks. And what they've been doing is working really, really hard to develop a plan that is countywide for what we need going into the future for our transportation needs. And that's not just the county's transportation needs, but, you know, the cities and so on. And so they've kind of laid that out, and they've also laid out the connection in the regional conversation as well, so that we really know what we're looking at from the great big picture. And from, and including in that presentation, they aren't just talking about transportation solutions, they're talking about affordable housing, which we all are working on, no matter if we're here representing the county or a city. That's a big need in our county and in our state. And economic development. So if you talk about transportation, economic development, and affordable housing, now you're really talking about a plan, because one thing plays into the other, plays into the other. And that's how you build a really healthy, vibrant, sustainable community. So that's the plan. And it'd be good if you all could show up. Not mandatory, but I'm just saying, be a good idea. All right, so any questions of Debbie with regard to our budget? Good job.
Thank you, and I will say, for those of you who are not at the planning committee, you should have a binder at your place settings. You have the draft budget digitally, but you also have it in this format. During the course of the summer, your homework is to review it. Our homework as staff is to get the numbers locked down even further, because we still haven't locked in fuel prices yet. We'll be looking at things that are positive in this year to see how we can positively impact next year even more.
Yes, Commissioner Eggers.
Yeah, just on the numbers that we're looking at going out, I'm assuming they're incorporating the change in our service delivery with BRT.
Yes, it does.
And the corresponding service that we would be replacing, sort of, so
Yes,
that
it does.
those net effects, I'm assuming the deceleration in our reserves would be less? I mean, are we gonna have less?
This chart has changed slightly because we're anticipating less of a use of our reserves going forward for the operations based on the savings today. This also includes use of reserves when we look at it towards the capital projects that we have out there.
Does the BRT itself add more operating responsibilities than what we will be replacing?
Yes, it does, but that's public transportation. And it's an excellent one. It's our best route in the system. And so public transportation is, I can't remember, I want to say it's in the 30s, the fare box recovery ratio, which is phenomenal. And that's why this route is being looked at, based on the number of riders.
It costs us less than another route of.
Right,
Correct.
another route would have.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and these numbers reflect that.
It
And I
does.
think that short-term number of $5 million a year to find only addresses that 12.8. We have other issues, obviously, that we'll be talking about next month.
Yeah.
I guess more structurally than.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Anyone else? Before we, did you have something else, Commissioner Eggers?
No, no.
Thank you. I don't want you to leave, we're coming to the end of our meeting here shortly, but just for an information item, I would like to call your attention to this sheet that's at your place. It is a really great visual of where we started and how far we've come. So I think it very clearly, I'm assuming our marketing or PR department, communications, thank you, Whitney, it looks fabulous. It's just a really great visual, and it was very much appreciated yesterday during our visits in DC. And on the back, it is a great, I just think it's a great little marketing piece, which really helps to explain the funding and where it's coming from, and in case you have any questions when you're back on your different councils, you'll have it to refer to. And next, we have reports and correspondence. Brad?
Well, I'll just add to Commissioner Justice's request for a more detailed schedule of the board interaction, that we will just provide some more detail of these final two little stair steps there for next month. As I think Debbie said, next month we will approve, there'll be a vote on our trim notice, or our for our budget in the month of July. I should also note that the meeting in July is not the fourth Wednesday, it's July 31st, which is the fifth Wednesday of the month. And otherwise, we had a really nice month of May as in terms of ridership performance. Ridership was up, looked like complaints were down, so it was a pretty good month.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other business from any of our members? Yes, Commissioner Justice.
And I'm looking at the calendar now and seeing that PSTA meeting on the 31st. So it's not a surprise to you, I will not be here for that meeting. So when the dais is a little empty in this spot, you'll know you had advance warning.
Oh, thank you. Okay. Any other board member comments? Mr. Dan, down there.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say one thing. This is my second meeting. I cannot believe how fast we worked on those enclosures. I think that's incredible for the safety of those people, the bus drivers. I'm just overwhelmed. I'm very shocked, and I just want to thank everyone for your support in getting that done. I thought that was very commendable. Thank you so much. That's really all I have, Madam Chair.
There's nothing more important than the safety of our drivers.
Yep.
That's the backbone of our industry here. Commissioner Gracie.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
you.
There you go.
This has been a remarkable meeting, the culmination of a lot of years that I wasn't up here, but hearing about it, reading about it, and knowing about it has been a very interesting process, and I appreciate all the financial aspects that were offered. Commissioner Eggers, thank you very much for that.
Commissioner Justice, nothing else? Commissioner Fenger?
I would echo comments that were made regarding safety of our drivers as certainly a number one priority, and I do appreciate how quickly we have moved forward with that. So, thank you.
No question, we have a great staff, that's for sure. Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, just one other comment as it relates to the folks that were here today expressing some concerns. And you know, I think our staff does a really great job in preparing us. But I want to make sure that as we move forward, there's going to be more and more questions from the public and the folks that were here this morning and others, that we continue receiving them, at least from a staff perspective, with good spirit and review the questions and get back with answers, because I really ultimately, their goal may not to make it better for us, but in the end, I think it only makes us a little bit stronger and better if we continue addressing and make sure that we're staying in the weeds on all of this, because it's really important that we understand the details as we move forward. This is a really big deal, and we don't want slip-ups on our part, so.
And I couldn't agree with you more, Commissioner Eggers. The one thing that I do feel strongly about, though, is when you said in the weeds, you know how in the weeds transportation funding really is. Yep. And goodness knows, I've been on transportation boards for many years now, and I'm still learning the different pots and what you can do with pot A and pot B, and I don't even know what they're all called, but it's incredibly complicated. And so when you start talking about those in a public meeting, imagine we are working in it with our staff behind the scenes all the time. So imagine how complicated that sounds to our public. And so I do think that it would be good, Brad, I know this is tough, But on some of the factual data that is brought to us from the opposition, I do think it would be important for those factual things to be addressed with what the accurate fact is. Because I don't know where those facts are coming from that we received today. I don't know, but I do know that I have been involved in the conversations with the experts who are sharing factual data with us, which is very different from what we're hearing in this board meeting. And I would like us to keep that in mind, that we're trying to work on data-driven decisions here and not something that's plucked out of the sky, so, or wherever it is plucked from. Commissioner Albrecht.
Well, well said, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to elaborate on that also. This is a very complicated process, and in most projects, the most important thing is keeping the energy in the project and moving forward. So even with all the comments today, and I thank everybody that came forward with comments, there are things to consider, but you can get off track real easy with disinformation, and I think we need to know exactly what we're talking about, and and keep the disinformation from out there, because it is very complicated. And I'm glad we moved so fast on the safety barriers. I hope we can get back on track with Clearwater's Intermodal Center, though. We could. We had to take the funds out of that, which I'm glad that project got funded, but I'd like to get back on track with that too. So.
Thank you. Well said. Thank you. All right, everybody. Well, thank you very much for your participation today and your thoughtful discussion and questions. And for the good of the order, we are now adjourned. Thank you.
Good job, Al. I have a couple of contracts for you, John, if you don't mind. Wasn't there. This is a contract for the
So I
bearing.
signed your one in here, but Adams, they didn't have somebody witness the signature. I guess the witness appeared on the second page.
Oh. Okay, I'll just have somebody sign it.